Thank you again for joining us, everyone. And once again, we have the very tall lady with us who, frankly, is not, she's average height. She's not the tall lady. It's just she has a picture that makes her look tall. That's it. But anyway, today we wanted to get into a little discussion over this fairly abrupt and frankly kind of panicky attention that has been focused on men and boys lately. It's not that I think it's unwarranted, because it is, but it has an effect on us. It puts us on the spot, and it puts us in a place where, depending on who's focusing on us, we're really either being told that we are failing as men, or it's being insinuated that we're failing as men, or that the solution to the problem of men and boys is entirely to be resolved among men and boys. And the other side of that coin is that at the same time, there are others who are focusing on the condition of men and boys, and they're basically saying that the modern culture and society has failed us. And to that I of course say, well, if that's true, then it's at least 50% our fault, because or 49% our fault, because we're 49% of the culture and the society. But the real question I think to ask is, what should be done about it? Yes. But also, what is the best way for men, and especially boys, to be prepared for it, to be prepared for whatever needs to change in order to make this better, because we're quickly approaching a point where, it will be too late, right? And there will be too much damage done, and will become, a permanent liability. And that's never been true before, ever, you know. And so, we're in very uncharted waters, and it really is one thing to, even in our own movement, to stand up and say, men and boys are being treated very shabbily, and it's starting to take its toll, because all that's true. But the fact is that while we know we can't solve it all on our own, that's just never going to work. That also, we as men and boys are going to have a part to play in it, whether we like it or not. And there's, like anything else, a right way and a wrong way to go about doing that. Whether it's you know promoting real mentorship, or buying into red pill ideology, or just collapsing and becoming, incel, or a completely disengaged MGTOW. I mean, there's kind of a laundry list of different approaches, and different, I guess, movements, ideologies, philosophies, whatever you want to call it. But I've looked at all of them, and I've looked at them all pretty carefully. And, things either work or they don't, and my experience has been, the ones that require self-generated and self-compelled sacrifice and discipline and honor and maturity and forgiveness and welcome and compassion. Those ones are always the hardest. They take the longest. They're the most expensive. And the hard reality is those are the only ones that work. The other ones all fail. And when they fail, when the whole thing falls apart, everyone sits down and cries and says, "Oh, woe is us. How could this have happened?" And I look at that and I say, because you weren't willing to do what it takes, so that's my take on it. So I will open the floor. Call lady, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I mean, just what you were saying with these different movements, I think the hardest thing when it comes to the effect on boys and young men is inherently, I think, naturally, men and boys tend to have a lot of anger, or they're more prone to anger as I don't want to say a default emotion, but a stronger emotion. And that tends to lead to the community that you're describing. A lot of them are based on the anger that they have. And without mental clarity, when you are going through a phase of anger, it leads to some misleading commentary and misleading ideologies that you find all over. And so there's this sort of great divide where, on one hand, there are women out there who are absolutely victims. They're absolutely, they have their right for being fearful. And we can't really say they're not wrong because we have communities like that. At the same time, we also have the women who are adding on to it, to the culture. You were saying maybe 49% of the population. And that'd be true. And that's true. And it is true that that means they, I guess, mathematically make up 49% of their own problem, because then the other 50-51 is also the females in their life. I mean, it's always said that children are attracted to the the parent of the opposite gender. And so mothers have some of the greatest influence on their sons. And so for a good portion, whatever societal norm or treatment they learn from their mother. There's this whole idea of machismo culture in Latin America, but what no one wants to really talk about is machismo culture was as equally created by men as it was by women. The expectations of women in Latin America, which are very high. The guy has to work unbelievably hard. He has to do everything for his family, even if it means death. That everything needs to be sacrificed. They got to protect to the point that even if it means their life. I mean, it's a two-way road. Yeah, it's a two-way road when it comes to that.
Yeah, it is. And especially in Latino culture, because I get exposed to kind of a lot of it, and a lot of the, I guess, social politics uh, of at least Latin American life, and yeah, you're right. The worse things get for just, the status quo dominant culture, whatever you want to call it, you know, the more attractive it is for these subcultures to look at that and say, I don't want any part of it. If that means that I have to default back to machismo culture, and for men, just protect, provide, lay down your life, and and be macho, then that's what I'm going to do. Because I look over at just regular old white people culture and say that's just not for me. you know but one of the problems is that, like I said, it means that there has to be a separation. There has to be a bit of a divide between that culture and the culture at large, and it takes work, and it takes um, determination, discipline. It's like anybody can do that stuff for a month, you know, but to do it for your whole life, you got to be doing it on purpose. And like I said, I as bad as things are getting, out here, the longer you try to do that, the more difficult, complicated, and labor intensive it's going to be. So, I agree with you. I just don't see that as a real answer. It's more of a band-aid, right?
Mm.
And we've got a, like, gushing arterial wound. So I think a band-aid's gonna cut it, you know. But like I said, that's at least in that you know, in that attitude and that way of being, at least it's settled that um, everybody kind of understands, at least subconsciously, that everybody is involved, you know.
Mhm.
And in my world, and please don't ask me how the hell this happened because I don't know, but in my world, what's happening is that nobody seems to be very willing to admit and to roll up their sleeves and work together. Now of course in our around our campfire, we all just say, well, it's the feminine. I contend they played their part, but that's not the only thing that's wrong, and that's not the only reason why there's this divide between men and women, and like really just men and everybody else. But I can say, that like it's one thing to say that, but I think it's more important to say, and the results are X, Y, and Z. The results are, overall uh, lower and much more fraught relationships between young men and young women. I've never seen such a mess as that. It is. It's I
I think
have
it's also because people are feeling like they have to choose sides, though. I mean, I think that's
yeah,
you
I'm
brought up
saying
how in our campfire we say the feminists. I think that's the biggest issue is we have people around our campfire and all they do is talk about the feminists all day long
right,
and they don't actually focus on solving some of the issues.
right.
That we'll have to admit. There are some people
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
And it's sort of the same
There's
way
just
back.
a compulsion to feel as though they have to choose a side,
Mhm.
and I'm like, the the time and place to choose a side is, prior to combat, right? Prior to armed, organized insurgency or insurrection or civil unrest, and
Mhm.
uh, I'll be honest with you, I think we're actually kind of seeing some of that. It's coming out kind of sideways, but that's what I see. And that's the failure of the whatever the culture has been doing, whatever the social order has been doing. When you see that, what that means is what's been going on failed, it screwed up, didn't work, and now, it's a free for all, right? That's how people are. That's what happened. But in the midst of all of it, people with at least the ability to think a little bit are trying to stand up and say, this solves nothing and it will take us all to hell, you know, and we won't, once we're there, we're not coming back, so let's just not go, right? And,
Mhm.
and like I said, even in all of that, I don't know. I mean, there's just, maybe it's just a like a creepy feeling I have, but um, I don't like the idea that it all comes down to, what's wrong with men and what's wrong with boys. And I'm like, if people who are thinking and really genuinely concerned, and most importantly in a position to do something about it, if the only thing that they think of when they think of this is what's wrong with men and boys, again, I'm only being practical here, I'm only being pragmatic. Some things work and some things don't, and in this case, only focusing on us, I mean, maybe it would work given enough time and enough resources and enough patience from everybody, but we don't have any of that. We don't have time. We don't have, resources, and we surely don't have patience, So I don't know. I mean, it's like when I talk among men in the movement, You know, they really seem to have kind of fallen victim to this focus on themselves, you know, whether they're just bitter or angry or hurt or resentful, you know, all they can talk about is, you know, how they're being done dirty, right? And sometimes that bleeds over onto people who mean no harm and want to help, right?
Mm,
But my point is, well, you know, that's human nature. You know, I mean, we'll not be able to avoid uh, you know, hurting and putting off and offending and disregarding people who want to help if the only thing we can focus on, you know, is our own wounds and our own resentments and our own bitterness, you
mm,
know. And you know, I enjoy the luxury of, you know, being somebody who uh and you know, who is recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body, as it says in the 12-step literature, where it was made very clear to me kind of from day one that, you know, I can continue engaging in resentment and bitterness and fear and self-pity, but not for very long, you know,
mm,
because I'm a drunk and my job is to drink myself to death, you know. And if I if I can't sacrifice my bitterness, my resentment, my fear, and my self-pity, I'm gonna die, you know.
mm,
But most people, that's only 1 out of 10 people, right? You know, and so most people, they don't have that sword over their head, right? You know, it's like they can live out their lives in bitterness and fear and resentment and you know, just unreasoning anger from the beginning of their life to the end, right?
mm,
And so, you know, they don't have the like I say, you know, kind of dubious luxury that I do, you know. So it's like, what do you do with them? Like, what do you do? And I'll take it over to, you know, the woman's side of this. You know, it's unfair for me to just look at all women everywhere and say do better and then, you know, stand up and walk away. You have to be a little specific, you know, especially when it comes to the ones that want to help us do better, right? And you know, have it better. I need to be able to say, you know, you can do better and here's how, right? But I don't want to try to challenge anything that I don't understand pretty clearly. So what do you guys
mm.
think?
I'm just going to go back to the sort of the beginning of the conversation first of all, because we were talking obviously before we started about other conversations we've been having. I don't think any decision made in a blind panic is going to solve anything. That's a first. So people who are maybe on the other side of the aisle to us, who are starting to panic, don't stop it, because you're going to make a decision that's only going to make things worse. In terms of um, how we go about solving this and repairing the relationship between men and women, that is only something that is going to happen with time. Time heals all wounds, as they say, and we need to tread carefully. We need to tread respectfully. There is no place in the problem solving around all of this for radical ideas and radical solutions, because they just lead to bodies piling up. And I have no interest in seeing that. More than enough men are losing their lives for me. I don't want to see it anymore. So, what do we do? That is the question. What do we do? I
Yeah,
think giving men back their value is certainly important. Their value as fathers, as influencers on society, both at the small and greater level. I've said to you before, Taz, about, you know, you should mentor much younger men and boys, and I think that is something that certainly needs to be brought back into the culture as a whole, or cultures as a whole. We need to recognize, and Alison Tiemann of the Honey Badgers spoke about this several years ago on International Men's Day, when she spoke about the greased funnel effect, where men are falling into it and they're coming out the bottom, broken, often beyond repair. And even if we could repair them, it would take too much. So it's about stopping them from falling into the grease funnel in the first place. I think that's important. I have a role to play in that as a father, helping my son to make the right decisions going forwards, as well as my daughter. I don't know how her life is going to go yet. She's still young. She's still got to grow. She's still got to find her what type of or who is she is going to be in every aspect of her life. So I have a role to play in this, but we need to take an analytical step by step approach to solving this, to fixing the problems.
Yeah.
Going into this like we are at war isn't going to solve anything.
No. No. And I like what you just said about making it a step-by-step process, and keeping our wits about us. Tall lady, you spoil me, in terms of presenting myself as a mentor, and you're not alone in that. You spoil me by keeping a clear head, keeping the actual problem, right in front of you. In other words, I don't have to use 15 minutes of my time just kind of talking you off the ledge, right? And like I say, I've kind of gotten used to that, but I have found, that even in our own movement, and certainly, on the other side, I do have to spend kind of a lot of time, helping people like get their stuff together, so that they can think clearly and focus on the actual problem, and by the way, that difficulty is not gendered. I have to do it as much with boys and men as I do with girls and women, and so I just kind of accept my lot in life, that when I'm just out there, this is the way it is, but like I said, and DeadDuck, your encouragement for me to mentor, that's starting to work out, right? I mean, that's starting to bear a little bit of fruit, and that's nice. I am hoping it will be a good thing, but even at the same time, it takes a toll on me. It's I'm sure you, as a father, to both a son and a daughter, you're kind of a perfect example, for this, is that, for you, being a father takes a toll. It's rewarding, and it's fulfilling, right? And all of it, but it doesn't come for free, right? And the same is true for me. So when it's weird, because when I go to kind of express that, and look for support with it, what I'm trying to say is, doing that stuff, a little difficult, a little taxing, just on my tattered little soul or whatever. And, sometimes I need to catch my breath, and make sense of it, and be able to be sure that I'm doing the right thing, and I'm doing it the right way. And when I do that, when I talk about it, very often, one of two things will happen. Either I will be told that, I'm doing a good job and don't worry about it, okay, or like I say, then the focus comes back to me, and just like my mental health and the condition of my mind and spirit, like then people become worried about me. And it's not that I mind, it's not that it doesn't upset me, right? But it doesn't really get me back where I want to be. it doesn't put me back in a place where, I'm ready to get out there and get back at them. So I guess I'm saying all that to say, there's no easy way to even lead other men and boys away from that greased funnel. Yeah, I mean, it's a bad idea to let them fall in, for sure, but it does take work and an honest desire to keep at it in order, to make it work, right? In order to steer young men and boys and even older men away from, the indifference and sometimes outright hostility that let's face it, they face that every day. And so, this is why, if I do have any bitterness and resentment, it's toward the power structures that make sure, that never goes away, right? I mean, that we know that the institutions that we live under and the social conventions that we live under, make it possible to always harbor some indifference toward men and boys. And when those men and boys, fail to overcome that, then they're faced with outright hostility and aggression, and I'm like, well, maybe that's, it's that way because that's the way it's always been. The only point I try to make when, people focus on me is it's just not working anymore. It ran out of gas. The wheels came off. It's parked by the side of the road and it's not moving. And it's just going to sit there and rot. And there maybe it's time for a new vehicle. I'm just saying, right? It's already thrown a rod. All the wheels are gone. Somebody came by and grabbed the side mirrors and it's, got an abandoned vehicle sticker on it. It's a dead thing, right? So, then of course you get into a conversation about what do we do? What will make it better? What will move it along? What will help young men and boys especially, but all men and boys, avoid falling into this greased funnel, this trap, this inevitable morass, and I'm like, well, I have my own answers to that. But you guys know that, I believe in the kinds of virtues, that can only originate from within people. I can't give either one of you, a desire for honor and humility and maturity and forgiveness and compassion, and thoughtfulness. I can't wad up a bundle of it and hand it to you. You either go look for it or you don't, but with like people like you, I don't have to. It's already there, and then, I get questioned by people that don't really see it that way. And I have to ask them the same thing. We were talking in the Discord yesterday, and that was what I was doing, with that young man. I was saying, you're asking me what I think ought to be done and what I think will make things better. And here are my ideas. And I can't give you any of them. I cannot wrap them up and hand them to you. You either have them or you don't, but the only reason I bring it up is because if not enough people have that, then, Jesus couldn't fix this. I mean, it's unrecoverable unless lots and lots and lots of people, start taking those things on all by themselves for their own reason, and for me to talk to young men and boys, to put it to them that way, and this is what seems to work for me, to tell them neither I nor anybody else can present you and give you the use of these virtues. You will have to go get them for yourself, but my point is, if you don't have them, the greased funnel awaits, and it will get you,
Yeah,
maybe not now, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. And once that happens, that's kind of it. Very few people get a second shot at exercising and celebrating, virtue and goodness. You get that one shot, and if you blow it, then you get torn up.
I don't.
And
I don't
now
think.
I kind of say the same thing to women and girls. But I can't give you none of this stuff, man. I don't know. Anybody can give you this, but if you don't have it, you're gonna get hurt.
I don't think that celebrating virtue and goodness actually makes you virtuous or good.
Well, no.
Fine.
But I
It's
mean, if you have them and exercise them, they feel pretty good. I
it's
mean, they are a reward of their own.
yes, you will be celebrated for your virtue and for being a good person, rather than you celebrating the fact that you are a good person, you are full of virtue. If you're celebrating your virtue, it's just nothing more than saying to the world, "Look how good I am." In which case, you're probably not a very good person, to be fair.
Right. And,
Um,
really, that's another complicating factor, is that, the ability to make use and to make a lack of a better word, reward, or to make progress using virtues is a lot more complicated than just signaling that you have them,
mhm.
and that you love yourself for them, right? That's fairly easy, and lots of people do that, but again, the greased funnel awaits, right?
Mhm.
It's coming, and there is no stopping it, right? It has to be the exercise of, and like for me, my own belief in the value of those things, um that's what I have to work on. That's what I have to be diligent about, to say, it's nice that I'm, being a good guy today, but after I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to have to be a good boy again, right? It's like some days it's not very easy, but
Mhm.
but like I said, I enjoy this very large and sharp sword over my head. I know what happens if I give up on that stuff.
Mm.
I have had that experience, but not that many people do. I don't know. That's what I think.
I'll say.
Always leaving us speechless.
Well, I said it in the Discord yesterday at the start of the live stream. This is why young men need to listen to older men, because they'll actually learn something. And I do. I believe that, and I try to explain that to the younger people we've got in there. Unfortunately, it's very much a case of you can take the horse to water, but you can't force it to drink.
That, and I think also just, and this isn't like a reflection on you, but this is one of my issues in the men's movement in general. I feel like is we have so many older figures and they say such wise things, but the problem is when they just try to mentor to the youth, and this is slightly why I'm scared about Jordan Peterson having a school, is they're not very good at translating it to the modern people. They're using a terminology per se that the younger person understands the purpose behind it, but the way they're saying it or the specific words they're using aren't attractive because they're old fashioned in a sense,
Yeah.
You tell them about virtues and stuff, they understand the idea you're trying to come from, but the word itself, they think you're telling them to like keep their virginity and be a saint and all of that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if you use the word first, they're just like they immediately just turn off. But if you explain it, they tend to understand more.
Right.
It's
And
the
yeah,
callow nature of youth at the
right.
end of the day.
Right. Yeah. It's callousness, inexperience, um, hubris of youth. And, lady, you're right. one of the biggest stumbling blocks I have is being able to translate things that, like I said, I know them, I'm very comfortable with them, and I'm used to them, to translate all of that over to somebody, who's playing League of Legends, or Fortnite, right? It's not an easy conversation to have. But sometimes it leaks through, like the young fellow we were talking to yesterday, before it was all over with, like 2.5 hours later, he was starting to see what I really meant instead of what he originally heard. But it's, I mean, if you can find me ways to be more efficient with it, I'm all ears, because I don't know if I'll ever be all that good at it. But like I said, for guys like myself and DeadDuck and Lady, your father, and all of us old duffers, the point is to keep trying, and try also not to be repetitive. There's one thing about being young is, if an older person starts telling you the same damn thing over and over and over again, you tend to tune out. But if you can re-deliver the same concept using a different set of words, then at least it's different. It like forces them into looking at it from different angle. And like I said, that's to have a little mercy on younger people. Like, it's not like they teach that in school, and it's not that it's easy to come by. The ability to look at things from more than one angle is a rare commodity, and it's getting more rare every day, right? The people that they, for a long time would refer to as a Renaissance person, polymath, somebody that has a lot of different talents and a lot of different or a very wide viewpoint, they're getting really scarce. I mean, there's some out there, but not very many. And it's like, if there's no value in it, if I can't at least convince a young man or a young woman, that it will be of use to you to be able to look at things, from more than one angle, then why should you do it? The life of a young person, especially in the modern West, is very busy. Your time is at a premium, and to sit and like contemplate your navel, trying to figure out different ways to look at things, can seem like kind of a waste of time if there's no payoff, so to speak.
The part of the problem we've got in the culture is this need for instant gratification. And the problem with wisdom is that it's hard earned over a long period. And that's the problem we have when trying to make, in particular, younger men more aware and try to impart our hard-earned knowledge and wisdom upon them. I said yesterday in the Discord, if I had listened to the men around me when I was 18 years of age, I would still be doing what was my dream job. I wouldn't have made a mess of things to the degree that I have. And I suppose that is a form of regret on my part. But by the same token, I can't do anything about it. There's no point in me getting my knickers in a twist over it. I've just got to get on with how life is now, and understanding that I wish I knew then what I know now. And I wish I'd had the wisdom of the 40-year-old divorced father of two.
Yeah, well, yeah, the wisdom of the divorced 40-year-old father of two, in such a way that you could take it on, internalize it, as they say. I grew up surrounded by a lot of people, well, at least some people, who were much older than me and really did have my best interests, at heart. They did a very poor job of communicating that to me, and I don't fault them for it because, you know, that was all they had, right? You know, I hate the old cliche of, well, they did the best they could with what they had, but sometimes that's what it comes out to, you know, and sometimes, very often, you know, it just like what you just said, you know, that person, that young person becomes an older person and looks back and says, you know, I should have listened, you know, and I didn't. And then it becomes just something you have to drag around or let go of, you know, because it didn't take, right? And, you know, the results are clear. But like for me, you know, those people, you know, I can acknowledge that uh, they had my future in mind and they wanted me to do well, but you know, they failed to get the point across. And I got to be okay with that because my problem is I'm still alive, you know, and that I still apparently have things to do, you know, and
Yeah.
if I'm like wringing my fingers together, you know, saying, oh, woe is me, why couldn't they have talked to me different, then, you know, I'm wasting a bunch of time that I don't really have, you know. And so I'm like, you know, and going back to the virtues, you know, the virtue of forgiveness, that's what it means, you know, that's what forgiveness means, is that now I had something that was just like around my neck like a millstone, right? That there was absolutely no way to address because it was something about the past, you know,
Mm.
and it was something that I could never go back to and redo, right? You know, so it's like my only choices are take the millstone off and drop it behind me, or keep it around my neck and eventually collapse, you know. And
Yeah.
like I
You
said,
see,
you know, when people hear things like forgiveness, you know, I mean, at least subconsciously, they understand that, you know, even if they just like many of the people that I forgave have been dead for a long time, you know, I can't go to them and say, I forgive you, you know, but that, like I said, that means I either drag that around for the rest of my life, however long that is, or I let go of it, you know, and neither one of them is free. You know, this young people have an intuition that if they forgive, you know, and if they develop compassion and humility, it's gonna hurt, you know, it really will. Because, you know, like for my case, letting go of those things was agonizing. You know, it really was. Sometimes it still is, you know. But living with those things was unlivable, you know. I mean, many ways, I'm a weak person, you know. I can't live, I can't live, you know, with bitterness and disappointment and fear and resentment and self-pity. You know, I those parts of my spirit, my mind, whatever you want to say, they're very weak. And I think they will never be very, very strong. You know, I can't resist those things the way a lot of people can.
mm,
You know, but then again, I don't know how badly I want to, you know. I mean, what's so pleasurable about bitterness and resentment and fear and self-pity, you know? I mean, yeah, it's got a certain morbid, you know, like comfort, I guess, but you know, like I said, I can't live with it, you know.
mm,
It's the way
mm.
it is, right?
Yeah,
So,
I look at this differently. It's not the people. I don't think that the men I had around me when I was 18 years of age failed me. I failed them. I owe them the apology. I need to say to them, I should have listened to you. I'm sorry. I won't get the opportunity to say that to them because they're 200 plus miles away. I don't know where any of them live. But looking back on it, and I'll go into the details, it's nothing major. I've got industrial dermatitis from handling old engine oil. And instead of wearing gloves and everything else, I just decided I didn't need to because at 18 years of age, I knew everything. And now at 40 years of age, I realize I knew absolutely stuff all. And that's the truth. And it's not a thing to bear for me. It's just, it happened. I've had to deal with it, and I've had to move on and do something else. So, c'est la vie, as they say in France. So yeah, tall lady, you have something to say, my dear.
I mean, you guys always leave me in a situation where I'm speechless because there's so much to talk about. That's right.
Well, pick something.
I
I think
mean, go ahead, Mike. The duck.
I think your problem is, my dear, you're such a good listener, and you've developed an ability to take this stuff on. So
Very fair. It's just when it comes to talking about mentorship, it's personally, I have obviously Taz over here and you who currently mentor me. And, in life, I've always had my father. And so I've always had great examples within my own life. Now, have I always listened to everything they said? That's another issue. And there are a lot of regrets that people have sometimes when they've had someone good and they didn't listen. As I know my father shared with me personally, he had a stepfather and his stepfather gave him a lot of advice and a lot of help. And he didn't listen until much later on. His stepfather helped him get better and then sadly passed too soon. So he
Yeah.
listened, but he listened late. And that is one unfortunate situation. I think general population boys, I think a lot of them are in a situation where some of them do have good examples and just aren't listening. I think there's a lot more of them though that don't have many mentors in their life, or at least good example mentors.
Yeah. I
The
had
people who are
a
supposed to be mentors in their life are either not doing a great job or just not showing them how to, I don't want to say how to be a man, but like how to get through life, how to accept who they are, how to have healthy relationships, how to have a healthy life. They're just busy saying, oh, just go with the social code and things work out. They aren't warning them about the grease tunnel, as Taz put it. They're not warning them about that.
right.
They're just warning them to sort of control themselves.
Yeah,
That's not how you're supposed to mentor.
that's true. I had a conversation fairly recently. Someone put it to me, kind of like, what do you think makes a good mentor? And I said, I get confronted that way either as a leader or a traditional mentor or an example or an object, right? And for the object part, I'm all for that. I can look, or I can point to the person that I used to be really not that long ago, and I can say, like, right eye to eye, do not be that guy. It's easy, right? And I can say why. I said, don't be that guy because you probably won't make it. It'll probably kill you, and if it doesn't, you're going to spend a lot of time wishing you were dead. So don't be that. So that's the object part. And then on the other side of it is being confronted with someone who wants me to be a leader, right? And out of all of them, really, that's the one that it's kind of a paradox because in my worldview, one of the clearest markers of a good leader is someone who doesn't want to be a leader very badly. It kind of has to be like nagged into it. Is it the downside of being a really eager and assertive leader is that you end up doing it for yourself, right? As opposed to doing it for the reason leadership is important, which is kind of for everybody. So I have to say, well, if anybody is encouraging me to be a leader, probably the first thing I'm going to say is maybe. I don't want to very badly, but if I get time, and then there's the traditional mentor, the, like Duck has always said, the elder, right? The one who has experience. And earlier in the week, I had an opportunity one of my coworkers, who's a young fella in Mexico, came to me and pointed out to me that he kind of sees me that way. And he asked my opinion on a really difficult issue having to do with work, that, that for what he does with it, the stakes are very high, right? He may end up, if he does the wrong thing, he may end up losing the job, right? So it wasn't a small problem, and I just gave him, I gave him my experience, and I explained to him what I would do if I were in his shoes, and how I would do it. The thing is, that's never a 5-minute conversation, even if it's somebody my own age, it's never a 5-minute conversation. I have to provide the experience, but I also have to explain where it came from, and why it might be different, probably will be different for them, in my opinion, a real important part of mentorship is recognizing that, you're trying to support somebody who doesn't have the same life you do, and if it's a young man, and Duck, I think you'll back me up on this, we know for a fact that their life isn't going to be like ours was,
Yep.
I mean, that's just given, right? But at the same time, and kind of going back to the, the virtues, are that, I try to encourage things in them that are versatile, that are handy, right? That aren't just like a blunt instrument that is only useful, when you need to beat something, right? Because when you're done beating whatever that is, then, you have to keep living, right? And that's when, the more precise and more versatile tools come in handy, I once in a great while can make some use of anger or even assertiveness, but like I said, those things are kind of a club, and once in a while you need a club, right? You need to like beat something into shape, right? But once that's done, it's like, now what? I'm done beating that thing into shape, and the trick is that, sometimes things don't require being beat into shape, sometimes things require being understood, right? And they require patience, they require, when I say require, I'm using that word purpose. It's like, if you don't bring those to bear, if one does not bring those to bear, one will suffer, and that's where the experience comes in. I didn't have patience with this. I was not humble here. I was unforgiving there, and here are the terrible things that happened to me because I wasn't, and this person I'm talking to might have a very different life than mine, but they still understand that, if they don't make some use of these more complicated but more versatile tools, that they'll suffer, they'll get hurt, right? That they'll lose a job or lose a relationship or, miss an opportunity, right? But it won't be the same relationship or job or opportunity that I had. It'll be something different, but these same rules are still going to apply. And if the stakes are small, if it's not a big deal, then it's very like attractive and seductive to say, I'm not going to be the bigger person here. Screw that. I'm going to indulge my pettiness and my resentment and my FU attitude. And, a week later, they won't even remember it. But if it's about a job, or an educational opportunity or a relationship, when I say relationship, I mean all the different kinds, those things matter, right? And those things will save you from suffering. Those things will save you from adding to a resentment that you might already have, but the point I always try to make is that, whoever it is I'm talking about or talking to, I'll point out to them, you're not special. You're not the one who can get away with being petty, resentful, unforgiving, unreasonable, and immature and still have things work out. It might not fall apart tomorrow or next week, but it will. It's inevitable. There is no way out of it. Right? Like Duck, what you were saying, the greased funnel await. And I'm going to point out that, and with all due respect to Allison Tiemann, there is a very different greased funnel that awaits young women and girls. And if you spend a few hours on TikTok, you'll see what I mean. There are some out there, they're beyond recovery. I mean, they're gone and they're not coming back. Right? They're just damned. And it makes me sad when I see it. It hurts me because I know what that feels like. But I also know there's really nothing I can do about it.
Yeah, those kinds of women are vindictive and
Right.
what have you. So you don't want them to come back unless they're willing to compromise at the very least, if not relearn how to not be angry and vindictive and everything else. And that was something,
But they have
I
to
would,
choose to not be ignorant first. That's the biggest issue with
yeah,
that. They have to
yeah,
choose to purposely, because a lot of those people like that, they're purposely ignorant.
yes,
So they have
yeah,
to choose to ditch that ignorance and arrogance and whatever else, basically throw everything they have, quote unquote, to relearn.
yes,
Yeah. It's, when I talk about those things, I try to make it as personal as I can, and what I'll do is just openly admit, that I was ignorant, and I was unforgiving, and I was impatient and immature, and bitter and fearful. And when I realized, as I did, I mean, it was put right in front of me that those things were going to end me up dead, right? And that they would end me up in a condition where I wanted to be dead. When that happened, and it was a moment in my life, I sat down, I was all by myself as usual. I sat down and I cried, because at that time, I thought, wow, there's no way out of this, right? I can't be, I am ignorant. I can't be wise. I am unforgiving. I can't be compassionate. I am immature. I can't be mature. I am fearful. I can't have any courage, right? And that's, I mean, when that really hits home, that was a bigger heartbreak to me than, the end of my relationship with my wife. Because then I realized that, yeah, not only, was that end inevitable, but, there's no way to ever have that again,
the first
And like I
the
said,
first step in dealing with that though is learning to forgive yourself first.
it was hard, man. I mean, it was hard, hard, hard.
Yeah,
It was, it took time, and it took like a lot of really patient and and mature people pretty much staying around me all the time. And just it was like, it wasn't what they said, it was how they were, that kind of let me turn the corner, right? I remember a conversation with my sponsor where, we were talking about me going into therapy, right? And he'd been my sponsor for about 8 months, and it was the first 8 months that I'd had sober in, years. And, he would have me over for dinner every night, right? And he's in kind of my face, telling me that he's frustrated with me, and that, I've talked about getting therapy for my trauma for these 8 months. And he kind of looked at me and he said, I can't help you with that, that
mm,
none of that happened to me, right? And you've admitted that it's, it's untreated and it's getting in your way. Well, now it's getting in my way. You asked me to be your sponsor and I'm being your sponsor. I can't help you with this and it's getting in my way. You're going to need to go get therapy. But while he was saying all that to me, he was cooking me a steak dinner, right in front of my face with, with diced potatoes and fresh corn, and fresh green beans and a tall glass of tomato juice, which is what I wanted. You know what I mean? In other words, it wasn't just a bunch of words he was saying at me. He backed it up. He was telling me all this and admonishing me and kind of, coercing me, but he was cooking me a steak dinner and the steak was like USDA prime from his butcher. Right?
Mhm.
It had to be like about a $40 piece of meat,
That's one way to convince someone to get therapy.
right? As I made an appointment the next day because I was like, I had no argument, that ugly voice in the back of my head had nothing to say, and it was like, that's, mentorship and like I said, being an example rather than just an object. That's what it's about. It's just as much how I am as anything I have to say. And I've noticed that people are more likely to ask me, for some kind of help or advice or whatever after they've heard me talk to other people, and after they've confirmed that I live my words, that I walk my talk, as they say.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, if I was able to come up with a more efficient system, I would have done it by now.
Yeah.
But this is it. It's difficult, it's complicated, it requires determination, but there is no other way.
Yeah.
If I want to be of any use, right, to young men, also to young women, and older men and older women, then this is the only way. Everything else fails. I mean, maybe it works for a little while, and maybe there's like some short-term, like you said, immediate gratification, but it all goes to crap. And I'm just like, I only got this little bit of time left, and I'm just not going to do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not going to talk out of my butt because I don't feel like it.
Yeah.
And
that steak dinner was obviously a metaphor for what your life could be if you just went and got some help.
Mm-hmm.
And he was right, and so
Yep.
was the steak dinner. And I went and got help, and even at that, I was just so like dismayed and skeptical that it was finally going to work this time, that when I met with my therapist, and this has been close to 8 years ago, that first time I looked at her in the face and I said, I'm not even sure exactly why I'm here, and I don't know if it's going to do any good or not, but if it doesn't, I'm done here, which is kind of a pretty unfair ultimatum to deliver to your therapist on day one. But, she looked me right back in the face and said, I understand, and I'm pretty sure I can help you. And the rest is history, right?
Yeah. And look at you now, you're eating steak dinners every day.
Well,
You're talking with us on Sundays, hosting your own show.
It's like, one of the other things that he really ground on me about was getting my diabetes dealt with. And I mean, it's like, that's one of the reasons I don't have a steak dinner every day. But it's like, but yeah, I mean, the principle is solid. I actually watch what I eat, right? And the guy I was a year before I met him, I was down to, like, for breakfast and lunch, I would drink a can of Ensure, which is just, like a nutrition drink, and coffee with whiskey in it, right? to get me going in the morning, and then about half of a half pint of whiskey and another Ensure for lunch, and when I'd get home from work, I'd be hungry enough that I would actually eat solid food sometimes and then drink myself to sleep. Now at my age at that time, which was, mid-50s, I think I can tell you with some confidence that didn't do my diabetes any good.
Yeah.
Apparently it made it worse.
Well, all alcohol is essentially is fermented sugars, so
Yeah.
and mixed in with other bits and pieces, but yeah. It's not good for you.
So it was apparently not a very good diet, but now I
If
don't
you
do
left
that.
the whiskey, you could have had steak dinners every night.
I know I certainly could have afforded it a lot easier, but I was not that guy, right? And it's like I was not that guy, and I kind of needed to be shown how to be that guy. And now I know, but a lot of people tried to just explain it to me in the past. They just didn't do a very good job, And Doc, what you were saying before about, what what kind of apology I owe to the people who tried to help me. I also recognize that, I'm never going to get the chance to do that either. Right. In a few cases I did. I did get a chance to apologize. And of course it was met with, hey, don't worry about it. I'm just glad you're doing well. Right. And please don't drink.
Yeah.
But I mean, beyond that, it was like I said, the easy part was, petitioning for an amend, to ask forgiveness, but also to explain that I understood what I did wrong or failed to do right, and what I plan to do to make sure I'm not like that anymore. It's difficult and it's, humbling, but it's not complicated, right? It's simple, because you're going to that other person and making an amend. And it's very straightforward. They either accept it or they don't, but my part's done. And everybody that I amended to accepted it with open arms, right? But the part where I had to do the forgiving, and that's hard, and it's painful and it takes a minute. And, they always say you feel lighter when you forgive people. And, it's like, that's true, I suppose, but my experience with it was that I felt lighter. But, I also felt kind of adrift, like, I don't have this stone around my neck anymore. Now what do I do? I don't know how to be. Right? And same thing, I had to be shown, Celeste, you be like this, do these things, don't do those things, right? But I wasn't going to be able to hear any of it until after I did my part.
Yeah.
That's the hard thing, is people who don't understand the experience, they end up doing it a lot because they're so busy in this mindset of, they're so busy in like this mindset of just a lack of understanding. I'm trying to find the best way to put this. The only thing that's coming to mind is I've been home this whole week, and one of the hardest conversations I've been having, and maybe I'm being too rough on him, but with my brother. My father is not young. He's, whether we like it or not gonna be on this planet forever. My brother is unbelievably addicted to video games. My dad's want to do activities all week. My brother hasn't want to do anything. And I'm pointing out my brother, I'm like, you have to live this now because you won't have these opportunities later. You need to learn your mistakes now in high school and have those experiences. Because if you make them later, it's going to hurt more. If you don't spend the time now, you're not going to have the time at all when he's gone.
Right.
In the case of my father, when it comes to not wanting to do anything in high school, well, you never get to relive high school. It's a one-time thing. And I can't seem to get that through his mind.
Because he's young. He's a callow youth.
Yeah, it's because he's young, but here comes the tricky part, to look into your own past, right? And your own failures, opportunities that you personally missed and what resulted from it, and be able to lay that out in front of him, and not as part of a, you should do this, because these opportunities won't come around again. A completely separate conversation where you're saying, brother, here's an opportunity that I missed, or, like a good thing that I squandered, right? Or whatever the case may be. I don't, you have to come up with something, and you have to be able to prove it, right? And say, here's what happened to me as a result of it, and I love you, and I don't want you to have that happen to you. That doesn't prevent you from making other mistakes, but I don't want you to make this one. And the only way I can get it across to you is to just tell you what happened to me. I'm 61 years old. The first really, 40 plus years of my adulthood is just, a litany of misery and tragedy. So for me, it's easy. I can pick like any random period of time in my more distant past and say, here's where it all went to hell, and here was why. But for you, you suffer the difficulty of being a young lady, with some, like, you have your head on your shoulders. There's a lot of mistakes that you have not made, at least not yet. So you're going to have to work a lot harder to come up with a litany of misery of your own. But if you love him, you will.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily about coming up with a litany of misery as such, but just an example of, or examples of where you missed out on something that you will never get the opportunity to do again.
Yeah.
And the problem you've got with your brother is the exact problem that we've got, whether it be in the Discord server or in society at large, with younger people, men or boys and girls, is they don't want to listen quite often to those of us that have lived a life. They don't want to.
I think they're sheltering themselves. It seems to be that they're staying in their own little bubble by not listening.
It's not necessarily about sheltering themselves. It comes down to the ignorant and arrogant belief that you know it all.
Yeah. I mean, but that's a, I mean, if there's some biology involved in this, that would be it. The hubris of youth is, like I said, you don't have experience until you have experience.
Yeah.
And you don't have humility until there's a reason to have it. And like, the reason doesn't just mean bad things happened. The humility comes in when you realize that bad things have happened, and if I don't change, they will continue happening.
Yeah. Humility can also come from having good experiences, but dealing with the good in the right way as well.
True.
Yeah.
True.
Not being arrogant about your achievements.
Right.
Understanding that, say, like high academic attainment, for example, there's a whole group of people that have enabled you to do that, whether that be, your parents have pushed you to a certain degree, or the school teachers have recognized your natural abilities from a very early point and have taken steps that you may not even know about to help you reach and realize your potential. So, for example, academically.
Right.
And the humility in that situation is understanding the fact that you didn't do this on your own.
Yeah, that's sort of a unfortunate of ladies' position is, we men, and Duck, I think you'll back me up, grown men get a lot of encouragement, not to toot our own horn, and not to be overly proud of our accomplishments. So that's easy for us. I mean, we spend a few minutes tooting our own horn, and we don't hear the end of it, all week long. But the problem is that, lady, that's something that you're going to have to manage kind of on your own, because nobody is, well, nobody, not very many people are going to raise hell with you, if you are very openly proud of your accomplishments. They're going to pat you on the back, so that's kind of they're not doing you any favors that way, right? So it's like I said, you kind of have to just say to yourself in your own little head, yeah, this is a good accomplishment, but it's only that, and it's over now anyway, and I might not pull it off next time. I tell people all the time, and this is something that like you regular folks still have a hard time understanding, that I tell people all the time, I'll tell you that there is every possibility, right, that I will end up giving all this up and turning my back on all of you. And when I say all of you, my whole family of choice, crawling back into a bottle and dying a miserable death. Okay. That is not now, nor will it ever be off the table. My sense of self-preservation is completely contingent. Okay. I told my therapist, it's like, I understand the concept of I want to live because I'm alive. It's just that that's no longer a good enough reason. I want to live because I'm alive and my life is still livable, and most of its livability is on my shoulder. It's like I have to make sure it stays that way. I mean, the only thing that separates someone like me from someone who has a hard time understanding that is the fact that I know from firsthand experience what that process is like. If we finish this conversation and I roll up to the liquor store, I have a whole week's vacation ahead of me, right? And if I were to do that, I would be drunk every day of that week, right? I would. I mean, that's just how I am. That's how I drink. And I wouldn't be a little bit drunk. I wouldn't be tipsy. I would be blackout drunk, right? And you guys would probably never hear from me again, and I'm like that. I have to confess that is a possibility. It can happen. There's nothing physically preventing me. The only thing preventing me is kind of me. I have to love and appreciate and value, the fact that the two of you exist, and that you take the time to listen to me and talk to me and support me and care about me. I said the word I have to, because if I choose not to, then I will avoid doing those things for a short period of time. And then all of my problems will be over forever. Like I said, it's a hard way to have to look at things, but once you do, then you don't ever really stop. Right. Like Nietzsche said, when you look long into the abyss does look into you. And that's what happened. And I'm like, I'm okay with it. It's like I see the value of that. It makes me able to say that, I love and respect and I care about both of you and all the other people in my life. One of the byproducts is that the people that I can't do that very well with, they leave me alone, right? I don't hear from them, and that makes me just as happy as spending time with you, is that I'm not burdened with having to spend time with them. Back in the old days, they were around all the damn time, couldn't get away from them, but now they're gone. Good riddance, Anyway, we've been at this for a while. Anybody else have any final thoughts?
Not really. I think I've pretty much laid my cards on the table with this one. It's, as I said very, very early on, it's going to take a lot of time, and it's going to take not making rash emotional decisions. We've got to think about this, and we've got to be careful with it. We've got to be, another thing that I'm interested in is aviation. We've got to be the airline pilot in the midst of a major emergency. be clear-headed, think about what we're going to do next, and be calm. Anything else, we crash and burn.
Yep. With a
See, now you
full-
mentioned airlines, and all that's coming in my mind is a reading from one of my classes about the importance of mental models in life. And they used examples from two different, one was a plane crash and the other was a crash. One was a plane crash that landed where everyone was dead, including the captains. Nobody survived. And the other one was a plane crash, but everybody survived.
Yeah.
And the idea is that with this mental model, it's not just memorizing every step you have to do in an emergency. It's sitting there and having patience and being calm and mapping out, doing a visual in your head of everything you have to do. Because if you aren't practicing that visual in your head over and over and only just memorizing words, when the moment happens, you're going to freak out. You're going to do something wrong, and that will end up being, in the case of aviation, fatal.
Yeah. And crash.
And crash. And
Yeah.
I guess you can apply that to life.
Pretty much.
Map out life in front of you. Think it over and over, but don't just memorize it. Don't let it be words. Think of it visually and stay calm and have patience and go step by step, because if you do something too quick, that's your, what was it? The grease tube? The grease tunnel?
Yep.
Grease
the
funnel,
grease
You're in the
funnel.
grease
Yep.
tunnel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a fact. You know, I guess I've told you this, lady, and Duck, you've heard me say this. You know, this is one of those moments in history where everybody on some level knows that, you know, we're standing pretty high up on the shoulders of our ancestors, right? You know, we inherited quite a lot, right? But, you know, we're at a point where it's really becoming difficult to handle all of it responsibly, you know, and to handle all of it in a way that will have it still be there when we're gone, right? We're blowing it, you know, that we are collectively, we're blowing it, you know, and Duck, your aviation, you know, analogy is pretty apt because, you know, really poor decision making, sluggish reactions, and, you know, foolish attitude in the cockpit, you know, can result in the plane starting to go down. You know, and I think that's kind of where we are, but we haven't hit the ground just yet. And, you know, there's still time to pull up, right? But in order to make all that happen, there's like clear-headed, calm, and wise decisions to be made pretty quick. You know, like,
Yeah,
I say to people, we don't have an eternity, you know, before we hit the ground.
We've got long enough, and that's the thing.
Spoken like a true father.
I will just in case anyone listens to this and, you know, they have lost people in aviation accidents or what have you, there are some crashes which are unfortunately irrecoverable. You cannot save the situation. This is not one. This is not one of those.
We still have time.
Yeah, what this is we've just taken off from LaGuardia and hit the birds.
Right.
We're a few thousand feet. We've got the time.
Yeah.
We just have to use it wisely.
Right.
And if we do so, we're all Captain Sullenberger.
Yep.
If we don't, we're all in the drink.
Yep. Yeah. But, you know, we're
flame.
Individually, any of us, you know, if we end up in the drink, any of us individually, little known, not long remembered, you know, because it'll be too much bitterness and you know, too much sadness. But as you say, I mean, we'll, you know,
and don't sit down thinking someone else is going to stop us from ending up in the drink.
Yeah. You know,
no one else is going to do it but yourself.
Right. Yeah. But then you get to be the hero, you know. Like I say, I got a thing about just being the hero. But at the same time, you know, saving the plane is the right thing to do. You know, I don't want to leave this world thinking that, you know, I know that, now it is unrecoverable and they are going in the drink. I'm just first,
Yeah. This is, it's not about us individually, collectively being heroic. It's the actions that we take.
Oh, well put.
The actions of the actions in of themselves are heroic. We are not heroes
Nice.
at the end of the day.
I like that.
Do it for the purpose and not for the pride.
Yes, definitely.
Amen. All right. Well, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. And thank you to everyone listening. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.